The scream of metal came first, a sharp, echoing clang that didn't belong in the quiet of dawn. Then came the hiss, a long, rising breath of pressure escaping somewhere it shouldn't. Steam poured from the side of the North Line towers, like the lake itself had decided to rise and breathe through concrete. Andre Bennett stopped mid-step on the balcony, coffee mug in hand. The April air off Lake Ontario was cold enough to sting, but what froze him wasn't the wind. It was the sound. It was the kind of sound you learned to recognize when you spent your days inside the bones of buildings. Heat exchangers, valves, pressure lines, all the unseen organs that kept a tower alive. Then he saw it. Across the narrow gap between units, the bathroom window of the penthouse next door was fogged white. Behind the mist, a figure moved, frantic. A woman's silhouette, pressing against glass, her movements jerky, panicked. For a heartbeat, Andre thought she might be fighting with someone. But when her hand slammed against the window, he caught a glimpse of her face, flushed, gasping, and realized what it was. The lock had jammed. Steam filled the room like smoke from a fire. Not again, he muttered, setting his coffee down hard enough to slosh. He grabbed his maintenance bag from the wall hook, the same one that hung beside his daughter's pink raincoat, and uncoiled his safety rope. Inside the apartment, the soft hum of a cartoon played from the living room. Zoe sat cross-legged on the carpet, her dark curls haloed by morning light, building an icebreaker ship from Lego. She looked up as he passed. "Daddy, is it the boiler again?" "Something like that," he said, forcing a smile. "Stay inside, baby. No balcony today." He stepped back out, clipped the harness around his waist, and tested the rope with a tug. The sun had barely cleared the glass skyline of downtown Toronto. Ferries drifted across the lake like ghosts. Most of the city was still asleep, baristas, bankers, brokers, all dreaming in their towers, while the man who kept their heat running was about to risk his life between balconies. He swung one leg over the railing, feet braced against steel, every muscle remembering old training from Halifax construction sites. Never trust the locks, never trust the pipes. Always trust your rope. The rope hummed under tension, a low, living sound that Andre Bennett had trusted his entire working life. Out here, between glass and wind, trust was the only thing standing between safety and a fall. He could still feel Halifax in his muscles, the weight of scaffolds swaying over shipyards, the smell of salt, the lessons older workers drilled into him before he ever came to Toronto. Check your knots twice, anchor low, pull slow, don't let pride make you hurry. Now that old rhythm guided his hands. He looped the carabiner through the railing post, tested the knot, and leaned back, letting his body hang for a breath. The rope tightened cleanly, no fray, no slip. Good. He climbed across the narrow gap, one foot against the ledge, the other searching for grip on the cold metal lip of the next balcony. The wind caught his jacket, snapping it against his chest. Inside the steamed window, the woman stumbled again, coughing hard. "I've got you," he called. "Just stay still. Can you open the latch from your side?" "It's jammed," she shouted back, voice muffled by fog. Andre moved faster now, planting his boots, leaning in. His gloves squeaked against the metal as he braced himself and pried at the small vent pane with the end of his wrench. Heat struck him like a punch. The smell of scalding tile and eucalyptus oil poured out with the steam. Then a sharp crack. The latch gave way. The woman gasped as cooler air rushed in, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She pushed the window wider, and he saw her clearly for the first time. Early 30s, pale skin flushed crimson from the heat, hair dripping down her shoulders. A towel barely stayed wrapped around her frame, hands trembling as she reached toward him. "Come on," Andre urged. "One step. Take my hand." She hesitated, caught between panic and propriety, but the look in his eyes steadied her. No judgment, no agenda, just focus. She took his hand. Her fingers were slick, cold from shock. The rope dug into Andre's harness as he bore her weight, guiding her across the narrow space. For a moment the city disappeared, only their breathing, the rope, the wind. Almost there, he murmured. She swung her leg over the rail, slipping once, his grip tightening instinctively, and then she was across. Her foot hit the concrete of his balcony with a hollow slap. The two of them collided, her shoulder striking his chest, the towel twisting dangerously before she clutched it back in place. They froze. The world felt too close, the air thick with heat and adrenaline. He could feel her heart beat against his ribs, fast and uneven. For a fraction of a second, the chaos held them in the same breath, rescuer and rescued, strangers, bound by a rope and a choice. Then, the moment broke. She pulled away, backing toward the sliding door. Thank you, I didn't mean... It's fine, he said quickly, voice calm but firm. You're safe now. Go get some water. Down below, a voice crackled through the courtyard. Toronto Fire, you folks okay up there? Andre leaned over the railing. Two uniformed firefighters were already on the lawn, scanning upward, radios at their shoulders. All clear, he called. Overheated steam valve, no fire. They gave a thumbs up, but beside them, a private security guard still held up his phone, angling for one last picture. The small flash blinked. Andre's stomach sank. He turned back just in time to see the woman, Claire Davenport, though he didn't know her name yet, fumble for words. Please, I'll explain if anyone asks. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Just be careful next time. Her lips parted as if to say more, then closed. She nodded once, almost a bow, and hurried through his living room towards the hallway. Steam still clung to her like a veil. When the door clicked shut behind her, Andre stood there for a long moment, rope still in hand, the imprint of her fingers lingering on his palm. Silence filled the space where chaos had just been. He coiled the rope slowly, each loop deliberate, methodical, his old habit when his mind needed order. He hung it back on the hook by the door, beside Zoe's raincoat, the contrast almost absurd. One kept him from falling. The other belonged to the reason he couldn't afford to. By the time he looked out again, the courtyard below had changed. Two residents had come outside to watch the commotion. He could see them talking to the guard, their faces animated, glancing up at his balcony. One of them, the man in the tailored coat from Unit 2804, gestured, then mimed taking a photo. The guard nodded. Andre felt the old burn of memory, the kind that came from years of being looked at, not seen. He'd felt it in job interviews, where his name came before his handshake, at supermarkets where he was asked for receipts before anyone else, on job sites where a joke turned sour halfway through a sentence. Now, on a cold Toronto morning, it returned with perfect precision. He went back inside. The cartoon had ended. Zoe had switched to drawing, markers scattered around her like fallen petals. She looked up as he passed. Ba, she said, slipping easily between English and the Creole her grandmother used to speak. Are you okay? Andre crouched beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. Yeah, baby, just helped someone. She nodded solemnly. You help people every day. That's your job, he smiled faintly. Maybe one day, it'll get easier. Outside the window, the woman from the penthouse reappeared, now dressed in business clothes, hair pinned up. She stepped onto her balcony, glanced once toward his, then looked away quickly, as if unsure how to bridge the space that separated them. Andre didn't wave. He just watched her turn back inside, her silhouette swallowed by glass. From somewhere below came the faint murmur of voices, the beginnings of speculation. You saw them, one said? Looked like she was half. The rest faded beneath the wind. Andre closed the balcony door, locking it with quiet finality. He brewed another cup of coffee, though his hands still trembled slightly. When he took the first sip, it tasted of metal and cold air. A man could spend a lifetime fixing other people's problems, he thought, but one photo could still undo him in an instant. He sat at the small kitchen table where Zoe's drawings spread like a gallery of innocence. Paper ships, lakes, blue skies. He stared at them until the world stopped spinning. Somewhere down the hallway, the elevator doors opened and closed. the rhythm of city life returning to normal. But above it all, Andre knew the whisper had already begun to travel, slipping under doors and through screens. The maintenance guy and the woman from the penthouse. It would grow, as rumors do, twisting truth into spectacle. Still, for now there was peace. The rope hung coiled and quiet. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and soap. And though the air outside still carried judgment, inside these walls there was at least one small certainty. He had done the right thing. Andre leaned back in his chair, listening to the hum of pipes and the laughter of his daughter, and whispered to no one in particular, "Let them talk. I know what really happened." Beyond the glass, the lake shimmered in the weak morning sun, silver, restless, and indifferent, like truth itself waiting to surface. Between the rope that still swayed gently from his railing and the whisper already starting to spread below, the city seemed to hold its breath. What had been an act of rescue now teetered on the edge of rumor. Truth, bending under the weight of perception. Andre Bennett stood by the window for a long time, the coil of rope still in his hand, feeling how quickly peace could turn into scrutiny. In one moment, he had pulled a woman from danger. In the next, he could feel the eyes of 100 unseen judges forming their own verdict. He didn't know it yet, but that single flash from a phone, that blink of light, would follow him farther than any rope ever could. And as the day slipped into afternoon, that story, blurred, cropped, and retold, began its quiet climb through Northline Towers, floor by floor, device by device. By noon the next day, it would no longer belong to him. Still, in that small apartment that smelled of soap and coffee, Andre drew a slow breath. He glanced toward Zoe's crayons scattered across the table. Bright, fearless colors that didn't know what judgment looked like, and whispered, as if making a promise to himself, "Let them talk. We'll stand tall." If this moment moved you, if you believe that truth, no matter how slow, deserves its turn to speak, stay with us. Because what happens next will test not just Andre's strength, but the dignity that holds him upright when the world looks away. By noon the next day, the photo had already changed hands more times than a rumor could breathe. What began as a blurry shot from a security guard's phone had been cropped, filtered, and passed through the residents' chat like wildfire under glass. On screens across Northline Towers, the story told itself. A half-dressed woman clutching a towel, a black man in a safety harness reaching toward her across a balcony. The caption beneath one repost read, "Maintenance scandal? Unprofessional conduct?" Another added a question mark that said more than any accusation could. By the time Andre Bennett returned from inspecting the boiler room, the whispers had become smiles that stopped when he entered a hallway. A few neighbors avoided his eyes. Others greeted him too quickly, too brightly. At the front desk, the concierge, a young man who usually nodded with easy warmth, now fidgeted with his pen, pretending to check the delivery log. Andre signed the maintenance sheet anyway, the weight of silence pressing harder than any shift. Upstairs, a knock came just as he was taking off his boots. He opened the door to find Colin Hargrove, the property manager, standing stiffly in a gray blazer, tablet in hand. His smile was polished, not friendly. "Morning, Mr. Bennett," Colin began, voice wrapped in formality. "Mind if I step in for a quick word?" Andre stepped aside, though his gut already knew where this was headed. Colin's cologne hit the air first, sharp, citrus, expensive, the kind of scent that always made rooms smaller. "There's been chatter," Colin said, scrolling on his tablet until the image appeared, the same cropped photo, blown up just enough to make Andre's hand look too close, too familiar. "I'm sure you can appreciate how sensitive this is. The board has asked me to remind all staff that we uphold a certain image here at Northline." Andre's jaw flexed. "That image is a woman almost fainting in her bathroom. I got her out before she hurt herself." Of course, Colin said smoothly. The way people say, "Of course," when they mean, "I don't believe you, but I can't say so." Still, perception is everything. Some residents are uncomfortable. "Because of the photo," Andre said flatly. Colin hesitated. "Because of what the photo suggests." Andre stared at him for a long moment. "I saved her life. That's what it should suggest." Colin exhaled through his nose, tapping the screen dark. Just be careful, Mr. Bennett. These things have a way of sticking around, and you know how fast the board can act if they think standards are slipping. When he left, the smell of his cologne lingered like a warning. Andre closed the door gently, then leaned against it, eyes shut. The silence felt heavier now. Not peaceful, but defensive, He walked to the window, looked across the narrow divide. The curtains of Claire Davenport's penthouse were drawn. He wondered if she'd seen the photo, if she'd said anything. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she was hoping it would all fade. People like her usually could make things disappear. The phone buzzed on the counter. A message from building management. Board meeting this Friday to discuss maintenance standards and resident concerns. Attendance requested. He set the phone down without replying. Zoe came in from her room, clutching her sketchbook. She climbed onto the couch beside him, flipping to a page where she'd drawn him with a rope around his waist, a stick figure woman on the other side. Above them, she'd written in shaky block letters, "Daddy helps people."
Is that us? He asked softly. She nodded, serious. I saw people talking downstairs. They looked mad. Did you do something bad, Daddy? The question landed like a small stone dropped into deep water. Andre took a breath, choosing his words carefully. No, sweetheart. Sometimes people don't understand what they see, but you know what's true, right? Zoe studied him, then nodded slowly. You helped her. That's right. He placed a hand over her small one. We help people because it's the right thing to do, even if it's hard, even if others don't get it. Zoe tilted her head. Even if they say mean things. Andre smiled gently, especially then. She seemed satisfied with that, turning the page to draw something new. A big blue lake and a yellow sun, both impossibly bright. Andre watched her for a while, her quiet focus softening the noise in his chest. Then his phone buzzed again, this time a different number. The name flashing on the screen made his heart pause. Victoria Lang, chair of the condominium board. He answered. Mr. Bennett speaking. Her voice came crisp and deliberate. Andre, good afternoon. I'm calling to confirm you received notice of Friday's meeting. The board takes these matters seriously. As you know, image matters in a property like North Line. We can't afford misunderstandings. Andre's grip on the phone tightened. Understood, ma'am. But I'd like to think saving a resident isn't bad for the building's image. There was a small pause, then a polite, almost pitying sigh. Intentions aren't the issue. Optics are. Please remember that. The line clicked off. He stood for a moment in the quiet, the hum of the fridge filling the space where her words had hung. Optics. Another word for what people choose to see. Outside, dusk was sliding down the lake, turning the water steel gray. Andre watched it until Zoe tugged his sleeve. Daddy, you forgot your coffee. He blinked, smiled faintly, and sat beside her. Together, they watched the lights flicker across the towers, each window holding its own story, some peaceful, some cruel. He didn't know yet how far the rumors would spread, or how deep they would cut. But as Zoe rested her head against his shoulder, he whispered more to himself than to her. We'll keep standing tall, baby. That's all we can do. And in the quiet hum of the evening, the truth, small, unseen but unbroken, waited for its turn to be heard. The air inside the 12th floor corridor felt wrong that morning, thicker somehow, heavy with the scent of warm dust and metal. Andre noticed it first as a faint shimmer rising from the baseboard vents. Then Zoe stopped walking. Daddy, she said, pressing her small palm flat against the wall. It's hot, Andre frowned. Hot? She nodded. Like the heater in winter, but it's spring. He crouched, touched the drywall where she'd pointed. The warmth surprised him. The system should have been idling this time of year, running only residual pressure. Instead, the wall radiated heat. He shifted aside a framed notice about recycling and found a service panel hidden behind it. Good eyes, baby, he murmured. Pulling a screwdriver from his belt, he loosened the screws and lifted the thin metal cover. A rush of air escaped with a hiss. Inside, pipes wrapped in insulation gleamed with condensation.
one of them held together by a crude metal clamp, the kind of patch job a lazy contractor used when no one was watching. Steam bled from the joint in thin white ribbons. Andre's stomach tightened. He traced the pressure gauge along the line. Its needle trembled dangerously near the red zone. "That's not good," he muttered. "What is it?" Zoe asked. "Something that shouldn't be there," he said. "You found it, Zoe. Good work. But now I need you to step back, okay?" "Far back," she obeyed. Retreating down the hall, Andre knelt again, checked the fitting, then the valve. Tag. 14B. Penthouse circuit. Same zone as Claire's apartment. He exhaled through his teeth. If that clamp failed, it could rupture the entire heat loop, flooding the corridor with scalding steam before anyone reached the alarms. He grabbed his phone, snapped several photos, then took a quick reading from his handheld thermometer. 158 degrees and climbing. He typed a note in his log app, linking it to the building management system. Valve. 14B. Unauthorized clamp. High pressure fluctuation. Immediate inspection required. TSSA compliance risk. He added the time, the location, and his initials. Then he shut the panel carefully, pressing the metal until it clicked. When Zoe came closer again, he forced a smile. "All good, sweetheart. Let's head back home." But even as they walked, he could feel the heat against his back, an invisible warning pulsing through the drywall. Later that afternoon, he brought the report to Colin Hargrove's office. The man barely looked up from his computer. "Steamline issue on 12, Andre began. Valve 14B. Someone used a temporary clamp. It's not code. Pressure's too high." Colin clicked his mouse unbothered. "Probably wear and tear. Those clamps hold fine until next inspection." "It's not standard," Andre pressed. "If that joint pops..." Colin held up a hand. "Andre, I appreciate your thoroughness, but we can't flag every small fix as a crisis. The last thing we need right now is panic. You know how the board reacts." Andre's jaw clenched. "This isn't panic. It's prevention. TSSA Code 85 says any temporary repair on a high-pressure line has to be logged and replaced by a certified weld within 48 hours. Colin's lips twitched, somewhere between amusement and irritation. "You've been reading too many manuals. Look, I'll make a note for next quarter's audit. In the meantime, keep your focus on service." Requests. Residents are already sensitive after last week's incident. Andre stared at him. The word incident landed like a slap. He turned without another word, but before he reached the door, Colin added, "And Andre, maybe try to keep your head down, all right? Less attention is better for everyone." Back in the maintenance hall, Andre's anger simmered. He'd seen this pattern before. Shortcuts dressed up as efficiency, corners cut in the name of budgets, and when something finally went wrong, it would be the lowest name on the roster that took the fall. He pulled out his phone again, uploaded the photos to his private cloud drive, and added them to his growing backups folder, his insurance policy. Then he synced his notes to the BMS. If someone deleted the logs later, he'd still have proof. That night after dinner, Zoe sat at the kitchen table coloring, while Andre reviewed the BMS graphs on his tablet. Pressure in the penthouse loop had spiked twice since noon. Someone was overriding the automatic controls. He rubbed his temple, scrolling through the maintenance dashboard until a pop-up message blinked across the screen. Error, access denied, admin privileges required. Someone had locked him out. A soft ping drew his attention to his inbox. A new email, no subject line. The sender was hidden, just an anonymous address. He opened it. "You should stop poking around in things that aren't your job. The board already has eyes on you. KS likes to visit homes like yours. They'll be there soon." Andre froze. "Cass, the Children's Aid Society." His heart lurched. He stared at the words again, bile rising in his throat. Threats dressed as warnings. Zoe looked up from her crayons. "Daddy? What's wrong?" He forced his face to soften. "Nothing, baby. Just work stuff," she smiled and went back to coloring, oblivious. Andre turned off the tablet, though the glow of the message still burned behind his eyes. He walked to the window, looking out at the silver line of the lake, the towers, glowing gold in the evening light. The heat inside the walls wasn't the only thing building pressure now. Somewhere in this building, behind its polished marble and glass, someone was willing to risk lives to protect profit. And now, they were coming for him the only way they could, through fear. Andre placed a hand on the glass, the cool surface grounding him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, almost to himself, "Justice is slow, but lies burn faster." The lake outside shimmered, catching the last light of day, calm on the surface, but beneath it, currents were shifting, gathering force. The boardroom on the mezzanine level of Northline Towers was designed to impress. Polished walnut table, frosted glass walls, a skyline view meant to remind everyone that the higher you lived, the more you mattered. Yet that morning, as Andre Bennett stood at one end of the table, the room felt smaller than any boiler room he'd ever worked in. He wasn't supposed to be here. Maintenance staff were rarely invited upstairs for meetings like this. But the email from management had been clear. Attendance required, incident review. The air conditioning hummed too loud, the lights too bright. At the far end, Victoria Lang, chair of the condominium board, sat upright in a navy blazer, posture like a ruler edge. Beside her was Colin Hargrove, arms folded, expression fixed somewhere between professionalism and pity. The rest of the board, a half-dozen residents with coffee cups and polished shoes, murmured quietly until Victoria raised a manicured hand. "Let's begin," she said. "Mr. Bennett, you've been asked here to clarify the incident from last week. The photo circulating among residents has caused understandable concern." Andre's throat tightened. He clasped his hands behind his back, his stance steady but inwardly tense. "With respect, ma'am, there was no incident. A resident was trapped in her bathroom. Steam was building to a dangerous level. I used safety protocol to get her out." Colin cleared his throat. "Yes, but the optics..." "The optics," Andre repeated quietly, "don't show what happened inside that room. They show me saving someone's life." A few board members exchanged looks. One whispered something about procedure. Victoria's gaze remained cool. "And the resident in question, Ms. Davenport?" "She can confirm it," Andre said. "She's here, I believe." The door opened then, almost on cue. Claire Davenport entered. Late, her heels clicking against the tile. She wore a sharp gray suit, hair neatly pinned, expression unreadable. The air seemed to shift as she took her seat, the kind of presence that drew eyes without trying. "Miss Davenport," Victoria greeted her with a controlled smile. "We appreciate you coming. Could you please confirm Mr. Bennett's account?" Claire hesitated, just long enough for the silence to stretch. Her eyes flicked toward Andre, meeting his for a fleeting moment, something unspoken between guilt and calculation. Then she turned back to the board. "Yes," she said evenly. The lock failed. The room overheated. Mr. Bennett responded quickly. "I was unharmed." Her tone was precise, factual, almost sterile. No warmth, no defense. Just enough truth to satisfy the record, but not enough to challenge the whisper. "Thank you," Victoria said briskly, moving her notes. "That's helpful." Andre felt the words land like a stone, sinking into water. Helpful. Not true. Colin leaned forward. "Given the ongoing chatter, I'd suggest enhanced supervision for Mr. Bennett's department. Purely procedural, of course. Just until things settle." "Agreed," Victoria said. "A verbal warning should suffice. We all understand the need for professionalism and discretion." Professionalism. Discretion. The words tasted like dust. Andre drew a slow breath, keeping his posture straight. He could have argued, could have told them about the photo cropped on purpose, the threats, the faulty valve he'd found days later. But he knew how this game was played. In rooms like this, speaking too much was worse than silence. "Understood," he said simply. Victoria nodded as though he'd passed a test. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That will be all." He turned to leave, but a voice spoke softly from the corner. "Hold on a moment." Mrs. O'Leary, the elderly resident who'd lived there since the building's opening, adjusted her glasses. Her hair, silver and tidy, glowed under the light. She wasn't technically part of the board anymore, but she attended every meeting out of habit, or maybe principle. I was there that morning, she said. I saw the smoke, the panic. The man did right. And if you're going to punish him for that, maybe you should ask yourselves what kind of place this is becoming. Victoria's lips tightened. Thank you, Mrs. O'Leary. Noted. But O'Leary wasn't done. She turned her gaze to Andre as he stood by the door, her voice low but clear. Don't let them make you small, she said. Truth has a spine. Keep yours straight. For the first time all morning, Andre felt the air shift in his chest. Not lighter, but steadier. He gave the old woman a nod of gratitude before leaving the room. In the hallway outside, the sound of the city filtered through the glass. The muffled thrum of traffic, the cry of gulls over the lake. He loosened his collar and exhaled. The meeting had taken only 20 minutes, but it felt like hours carved from his dignity. He walked back toward the service elevator, passing residents who barely looked up. The whispers would continue, they always did, but Mrs. O'Leary's words clung to him like a thread of iron running through bone. Truth has a spine. He repeated it silently, step by step, until the elevator doors closed and the city's noise faded into hum. The knock came just after breakfast, measured, official, the kind that didn't belong to neighbors or delivery drivers. Andre Bennett froze mid-step, the coffee in his mug trembling. Through the peephole, 2 figures stood in the hall, their silhouettes crisp against the sterile light. A woman in a navy windbreaker held a clipboard. Her badge read, Children's Aid Society, Ontario. The man beside her was older, neat in a gray jacket, a calm face, trained to reveal nothing. Andre's throat went dry. The anonymous email from days ago flashed in his mind. KS likes to visit homes like yours. They'll be there soon. He opened the door slowly. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. The woman extended her hand. Agent Rana, this is my colleague, Mr. McKinnon. We received a referral regarding your daughter, Zoe. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Every word felt heavy. Of course, Andre said, stepping aside. Come in. The agents removed their shoes, polite, professional. Rana's tone was measured warmth, McKinnon's more procedural. Zoe sat at the kitchen table, crayons spread around her, sunlight spilling through the window. She looked up with wide, curious eyes. Hello, Zoe, Rana said softly. We just want to talk for a bit. Is that okay? Zoe glanced at her father. Andre nodded gently. It's okay, baby. Just answer honestly. Rana crouched beside her. Can you tell me what a normal day looks like for you and your dad? Zoe's face brightened. We get up early. Daddy makes oatmeal or pancakes. Then I go to school. After school, we read stories or draw. Daddy always checks the locks before bedtime. Twice. She giggled. He says doors like to pretend they're closed when they're not. McKinnon smiled faintly, jotting notes. And does Daddy ever leave you alone for long? Zoe shook her head, curls bouncing. No. Sometimes Miss Emma from upstairs stays with me if Daddy has to fix something at night. Andre watched, heart pounding, afraid every innocent word might be misread. Rana stood. Thank you, Zoe. You're a very smart girl. Zoe beamed, then turned back to her drawing. A house, a rope, and a bright yellow sun. Mr. Bennett, McKinnon began, flipping through a form. We understand there were some concerns raised by members of your building about an interaction with a female resident? Andre inhaled slowly. Yes. I rescued her when her bathroom door jammed. She was trapped. Someone took a photo from below, cropped it. It looked wrong, but nothing inappropriate happened. Rana nodded, expression unreadable. Would this resident be available to speak with us? Andre hesitated. Before he could answer, another knock sounded at the door. 3 quick taps. When he opened it, Claire Davenport stood there, composed, yet visibly nervous. Ms. Davenport, Rana said, recognizing her name from the file. I heard Cass was here, Claire said, stepping forward. I'd like to make a statement. Andre blinked in disbelief. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Her tone left no room for argument. The agents exchanged glances, then gestured for her to continue. Claire clasped her hands, her voice firm, but trembling slightly. The photo that circulated, it's misleading. Mr. Bennett acted with complete professionalism. I was trapped, terrified. The steam was suffocating me. He secured a safety line and pulled me across his balcony. He saved my life. There was no misconduct, none whatsoever. The words filled the small apartment like light, breaking through cloud. McKinnon scribbled quickly. Rana's gaze softened. Thank you, Miss Davenport. That's helpful. Claire nodded. If you need a formal letter, I'll provide one. Rana closed her folder. We appreciate your cooperation. Mr. Bennett, you seem to maintain a stable home environment. Zoe is clearly well cared for. For now, we'll note the positive findings, but as per protocol, the file will remain open for review. Of course, Andre managed to say, though his stomach turned cold. Remain open. 2 words that meant nothing was settled. Rana offered a polite smile. It's routine. You'll receive written confirmation within a week. When the door closed behind them, silence returned, like a physical weight. Andre sank into a chair. Zoe peeked from her room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Are they nice people, Daddy? She asked. They just want to make sure everyone's safe, he said softly. Did we do something wrong? He shook his head quickly. No, baby, not one thing. She seemed reassured, hugging him before darting back to her crayons. Claire lingered by the doorway, her expression unreadable. I'm sorry it came to this, she said quietly. When I saw those agents, I couldn't stay silent. Andre looked up at her, exhaustion lining his face. You didn't owe me that, but thank you. I did owe it, she said, voice low but certain. I let them twist the story once. I won't let it happen again. For a moment, they just stood there, the hum of the city outside mingling with the faint scratch of Zoe's crayons. Andre rubbed his palms together, eyes distant. You know, I thought I'd stopped being afraid of losing things. Jobs come and go, respect. You fight for that every day. But her... He glanced toward Zoe's room. If they take her away, I wouldn't survive it. Claire's eyes softened. They won't. You're a good father, Andre. Anyone can see that. He looked at her weary, but grateful. And for the first time in days, something inside him eased. Not peace, not yet, but a fragile reminder that he wasn't fighting alone. Outside, the hum of traffic faded into the rhythm of the lake wind. The city kept moving, indifferent as ever. But inside that small apartment, where coffee mugs still steamed and crayons scattered like confetti, the truth had finally spoken louder than the whispers, even if the world wasn't quite ready to listen yet. That night, after the door closed, behind the CAS agents, the apartment felt hollow, like a room that had just exhaled after holding its breath too long. Andre washed the coffee mug still warm from their visit, hung the rope back on its hook beside Zoe's raincoat, and sat for a long time at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Claire lingered in the doorway, as if weighing words she wasn't sure she had the right to say. In the end, she simply laid a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture, but one that kept him from collapsing into the silence. Tomorrow will be better, she said. Andre didn't promise anything. He just nodded, slipped the USB of evidence back into the drawer, checked the window locks one more time, and carried Zoe to bed. Outside, the Toronto night pressed against the glass, a slow
rhythm of wind and traffic. Within that rhythm, he could hear the building breathing, the faint hum of pumps, the soft creak of expanding pipes, the quiet heartbeat of steel and heat beneath concrete skin. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, understanding what the file will remain open really meant. Calm was temporary, peace conditional. Yet amid the fear, something had shifted. Claire's testimony had wedged itself between him and despair, a small, steady truth that refused to move. By morning, the city had turned silver again. Andre brewed oatmeal, packed Zoe's lunch, and shared a quiet smile with her across the table. A wordless pact that they would keep going, one day at a time. He dressed, clipped on his badge, and checked the building management system on his phone before stepping out.
The blue graphs pulsed evenly until one line flickered red, hesitated, then surged upward. The first sign came as a low hum from the walls, faint but wrong. Andre Bennett was making his morning inspection rounds when his phone buzzed with a notification from the Building Management System, BMS, steam loop pressure, 214 psi, exceeding safety threshold. He stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing at the graph, spiking upward in angry red. The heat exchanger on the east wing wasn't supposed to go above 180. A moment later, he caught it, a thin ribbon of mist curling from the ceiling vent, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Then came the smell, metallic, hot, sharp enough to sting the nose. Andre's pulse jumped. He lifted his radio. "Control, this is Bennett. Pressure surge in the east circuit. 12th to 15th floors. Possible valve failure. I'm initiating an evacuation." Colin's voice crackled back, clipped and irritated. "Negative, Bennett. Don't overreact. We've had false alarms before." "This isn't a false alarm," Andre shot back. "The gauge is in the red. If that valve bursts, you'll have a boiling corridor before anyone gets to the stairs." "Just shut it down manually and stop scaring the residents," Colin snapped. Andre stared at the vent. Steam was thickening, slow but steady. There was no time for bureaucracy. He sprinted down the corridor toward the emergency panel and slammed the fire alarm lever down. The klaxon roared to life, a long rising scream that filled every hallway with red light. Doors opened, voices shouted, feet shuffled in confusion. "Everyone out!" Andre called, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Take the stairs, not the elevators. Move fast but stay calm." Some residents balked. Others cursed at the noise, but the sight of his determined face made them move. From the corner of his eye, Andre saw Claire Davenport emerge from the stairwell entrance, coat half-buttoned, phone in hand. She looked at the mist gathering above and understood instantly. "What's happening?" she asked. "Pressure spike in the steam system," Andre said, moving past her toward the service closet. "I need to bleed the line before it ruptures. Help direct people out." Without hesitation, Claire turned and raised her voice, sharper than most had ever heard outside a boardroom. "Everyone, down the stairwell. Leave your bags. Move quickly." Her authority cut through the panic. People obeyed. Andre yanked open the service panel, heat slamming into his face like an open oven. The hiss was deafening now, metal vibrating under strain. He pulled a wrench from his belt, fighting to keep his hands steady as the valve shuddered. He found the bleed release. A small brass fitting meant for emergencies. Turning it too fast could crack the pipe. Too slow, and it wouldn't vent in time. He twisted, once, twice, the wrench biting metal. Steam blasted out, scalding his gloves, filling the corridor in white fog. The gauge needle trembled, then began to drop. 210, 190, 170. Andre held it steady, breath coming in gasps, until the sound softened from a scream to a sigh. The system stabilized. The building for now was safe. He shut the valve and leaned against the wall, soaked in sweat and condensation, chest heaving. His ears rang from the alarm, but beneath it, he heard sirens outside, Toronto Fire Services arriving at last. Downstairs, firefighters moved residents into the courtyard. The cold air hit like a blessing after the heavy heat inside. People shivered in robes and slippers, murmuring nervously. Some still glared at Andre for the alarm, but others, the ones who'd smelled the heat, seen the haze, looked at him differently now. When he finally emerged through the lobby doors, wrench still in hand, the crowd quieted. A firefighter approached, helmet under his arm. "You're the building engineer?" Andre nodded. "You did the right thing," the man said simply. "Pressure that high. Another 10 minutes, and we'd be pulling bodies." Andre only nodded again. Too drained to speak. Across the courtyard, Claire stood among the residents, hair damp with condensation, eyes fixed on him. For the first time since that morning on the balcony, she didn't just see the man who saved her. She saw the man who had saved them all. She stepped forward, voice carrying in the crisp spring air. "You heard him? He prevented a disaster. He kept calm when the rest of us didn't. You owe him more than silence." A few residents nodded.
Others looked away, ashamed. Colin, standing off to the side with a clipboard, looked pale. Andre said nothing. He didn't need to. The hiss of cooling pipes behind him spoke loud enough. Later, as the fire trucks pulled away and the crowd thinned, Claire approached him quietly. "You okay?" He wiped a streak of sweat from his forehead. "I've been better." She smiled faintly. "You've also been braver." He looked at her, then really looked, and saw not the polished executive who had once hesitated to defend him, but a woman who had found her courage standing beside his. The sunlight broke through the haze just enough to catch on her eyes. For the first time that day, Andre let himself breathe. The building still stood. His daughter was safe. And though the world hadn't changed overnight, something in the air had shifted. Respect, fear, maybe both. But for once, it was aimed in the right direction. By Monday morning, the gleaming lobby of North Line Towers no longer felt pristine. The air carried tension instead of polish. Clipboards replaced coffee cups, and the quiet hum of wealth gave way to the sharp voices of inspectors in yellow vests. 2 agents from TSSA, Technical Standards, and Safety Authority moved through the building like surgeons tracing a wound. They dismantled access panels, took pressure readings, photographed every valve and gasket. Andre followed silently at a distance, his badge clipped to his shirt, jaw tight. At last, one inspector, a woman with streaks of gray in her braid, looked up from her notes. "These replacement parts," she said, tapping a rusted coupling. "They're off-brand, not approved under CSA certification. You can see the difference in weld quality." Her colleague, flipping through the maintenance logs, frowned. "According to this, these components were replaced 2 months ago by a licensed vendor." He held up the tablet toward Andre. "That your signature?" Andre shook his head slowly. "No, sir. That's a copy-paste from another form. Look at the timestamp. It's been cloned." The inspector's brows knit together. "So someone forged maintenance records." "Someone," Andre said quietly, "who didn't want to pay for proper repairs." The words hung in the air, heavy as the metallic smell rising from the pipes. That evening, residents packed into the community hall for an emergency meeting. The chatter was thick with speculation, half-truths, and fresh fear. Andre stood near the back, arms folded, trying to stay calm. Colin Hargrove, immaculate in a pressed blazer, took the podium. Behind him, the large screen flickered to life, displaying the building's logo, and then a video. "Before we jump to conclusions," Colin began, voice dripping with faux authority, "I think it's important for everyone to remember the pattern of behavior we've seen." The video played, grainy footage from months earlier, showing Andre helping Claire across the balcony. But this time, it had been cropped tighter, slowed down, and stripped of sound, leaving only the image of a half-dressed woman in a man's arms, framed by flashing red emergency lights. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "That's the guy?" Colin folded his hands solemnly. This incident was investigated internally, but remains a stain on the building's professional standards. Combined with the recent chaos and evacuation, we must question whether certain staff have exercised proper judgment. Andre felt heat rise in his chest. "That video is doctored," he said, stepping forward. "You know exactly what happened that day." Colin gave a thin smile. "Mr. Bennett, please, let's maintain decorum." "No," Andre said louder this time. "What you're doing isn't decorum. It's deflection. You're trying to bury what the TSSA found. Cheap parts, forged logs, years of neglect. You want them to look at me instead." Murmurs swelled around the room, the board members exchanging uneasy looks. But Victoria Lang, ever the politician, leaned toward her microphone. "Until the investigation concludes, Mr. Bennett, we're placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately." The words hit like a hammer. Andre felt the ground tilt beneath him. Around him, residents whispered, some sympathetic, others satisfied. Claire stood frozen near the aisle, eyes blazing with anger, but powerless to speak over the board's authority. He turned slowly, forcing himself to stand tall,
despite the humiliation. "You can suspend me," he said quietly, "but you can't erase the truth. Sooner or later, it finds daylight." Later that night, Andre sat alone in the dim light of his apartment. Zoe slept in her room, her soft snores barely audible over the ticking of the radiator. He stared at the laptop screen, scrolling through the inspection photos he'd backed up, proof that the repairs had been falsified, that Colin's budget cuts had endangered lives. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He opened the message. "Stop digging, Bennett. You want your daughter to stay safe. Walk away." The words bled across the screen like poison. His heart stuttered. Another message arrived seconds later. "Next time, Cass won't just knock. They'll take." Andre sat frozen, fingers gripping the edge of the desk. The faint hum of the heater felt suddenly oppressive, the air too thick to breathe. He looked toward Zoe's room, her drawings taped on the door, her name scrawled in pink crayon. He whispered to himself, "They're using her. They think fear will break me." He closed the laptop, locking the screen with shaking hands. Then he took out the small flash drive he kept hidden behind the photo of his late wife. Every record, every log, every photo he'd collected. He slid it into his pocket. If they wanted a war of truth, they would have one. He stood by the window, staring out at the sleeping city. The towers shimmered like glass blades, cold and beautiful. Somewhere behind one of those windows, the people responsible were already plotting their next move. Andre whispered the words that had become his private vow, the one that had carried him through every humiliation, every storm. "Justice is slow," he said, his reflection staring back at him, "but I'm still faster." Outside, the lights of Toronto glimmered against the lake, steady, unblinking, and watching, as if the city itself knew the war for truth had only just begun. By the next morning, the city was buried under a thin veil of mist, the kind that dulled edges and made even steel look human. Inside Northline Towers, the gossip was still alive, but the noise felt farther away, muffled by something steadier. When Andre opened his door that morning, he didn't expect to see Claire Davenport standing there, hair pulled back, casual sweater instead of her usual executive armor. She carried a grocery bag in one hand and a folder in the other. "Before you say anything," she said quickly, "I'm not here for PR or to save face. I brought food and help." Andre blinked, half suspicious, half grateful. "You don't have to do this, Claire." She gave a tired smile. "I know. That's why I am." She stepped inside, setting the bag on the counter. Bread, fruit, soup cans, and coffee. Ordinary things that somehow felt extraordinary in his kitchen. "I also called a lawyer I trust," she continued. "Employment law, housing rights. He'll take your case pro bono if it goes further." Andre hesitated, looking at her, this woman who once measured her words in press statements, now standing in his modest apartment, like someone who'd stopped hiding behind headlines. "Why?" he asked quietly. "You've got your reputation. You don't owe me anything." Claire met his gaze. "Because silence got us here. And because you saved my life, Andre. It's time someone stood up for yours." He nodded slowly, the tightness in his chest easing, though only a little. Then she pulled out her laptop and opened a shared Google Drive. "You'll want to see this. I've been digging through the building's purchase records. Look at the vendors." On screen, invoices filled the folder. Long spreadsheets, PO numbers, delivery receipts. At first glance, everything looked official. But the deeper Andre scrolled, the stranger it got. "Same supplier name," he murmured, tapping the trackpad. "But the addresses keep changing. And these components, they're listed as CSA certified, but the batch numbers don't exist." Claire nodded. "Exactly. It's a shell company, set up to funnel money out of the maintenance budget. The payments look legitimate, but the equipment was never delivered to spec." "Colin," Andre said, voice low, "or whoever he answers to." Before Claire could reply, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Mrs. O'Leary, wrapped in her wool coat, clutching a small notebook. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, stepping in without waiting for permission. "I heard you might need this." She handed Andre the worn book. It's my resident log. I've been writing down maintenance issues since last winter. Every time the walls got too hot. Every time steam leaked from the vents. I told them months ago something was wrong. No one listened. Andre flipped through the pages. Shaky handwriting, dates, times, even sketches of the valve locations. It wasn't
just notes. It was evidence. He looked up, moved. You kept all this? I've lived here 30 years, O'Leary said simply. I know the difference between an old pipe and a lazy repair. Her sharp eyes softened as she looked between him and Claire. You two aren't alone in this, no matter what they want you to think. Claire squeezed the old woman's hand. Thank you. This helps more than you know. After she left, Andre sat at the table with Claire, the notebook between them, the computer glowing softly. They began to connect the dots. Dates from O'Leary's entries, lining up with invoices from the shell company. Here, Claire said, pointing at one receipt. This payment matches the week after one of her entries, the pressure complaint. They marked it as system upgrade, but no crew ever logged entry in BMS. Andre frowned. Which means the money went out, but nothing changed. Fraud, plain and simple. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. They've been stealing from the safety budget, and when things started breaking, they pinned it on the guy holding the wrench. Claire's voice softened. Then we prove it. We trace every invoice, every transaction. If we find the bank trail, they can't hide anymore. Andre looked at her, the resolve in her posture, the exhaustion under her eyes. Something stirred deep inside him, something that had nothing to do with pipes or paperwork. Why are you doing this? He asked again, quieter this time. Claire smiled faintly, almost wistful. Because for once, I want to build something honest, even if it's not a company, maybe just trust. The words hung there, fragile but real. They worked late into the evening, piecing together digital breadcrumbs, invoices mismatched with purchase orders, payments routed through numbered accounts. At some point, Zoe wandered out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, you're still working? Just a little longer, sweetheart, Andre said gently. We're fixing something broken. Zoe looked at Claire and smiled sleepily. You're helping my dad? Claire nodded. Yes, I am. Good, Zoe said simply. He helps everyone else. Then she yawned and padded back to bed. Silence lingered after she left, broken only by the hum of the laptop fan. Andre looked at Claire, his voice low. She's right about one thing. I've spent years fixing everything except my own life. Claire met his eyes. Maybe it's time someone fixed it with you. The distance between them felt smaller now, not erased, but bridged by something steadier than fear. Respect, trust, and the quiet understanding of two people who had finally stopped standing on opposite sides of truth. Outside, Toronto's skyline glowed like a constellation against the night, while inside the small apartment, two unlikely allies leaned over a table covered in evidence, and the fragile beginnings of something stronger than survival. The flyer appeared in every mailbox of Northline Towers that Friday morning, printed in large, careful type. Town Hall Meeting, Building Safety and Accountability, hosted by Resident Committee Moderator, Mrs. Ellen O'Leary. By evening, the community room was packed tighter than it had ever been. Retirees, young professionals, families with children, all drawn by the same mix of curiosity and unease. At the front of the room, a CBC microphone stood beside a folding table lined with water bottles and name cards. Two TSSA inspectors sat quietly, notebooks open. The lights flickered once, humming overhead. Andre Bennett stood near the side wall, his hands clasped in front of him, posture calm but firm. He wasn't the center of attention anymore, and that suited him just fine. At 7 sharp, Mrs. O'Leary, cane in hand, stepped up to the podium. Her voice, though thin with age, carried through the room with surprising authority. Good evening, everyone. For months, residents here have been told to keep quiet, to trust that our building was safe. But the truth, as it turns out, needed brighter light than our hallway bulbs could give. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. O'Leary gestured toward Andre. Mr. Bennett was suspended for speaking up.
Tonight, he's here to tell his side, briefly, because the real story lies in the evidence. Andre stepped forward. The murmurs fell silent. I'm not here for revenge, he began, voice low and steady. I'm here because when people live 28 floors above the ground, trust isn't optional, it's survival. I did my job. Others didn't. And when I tried to fix what they ignored, they came after my family. He paused, the air thickening. But truth has a spine. It bends under pressure, but it doesn't break. A quiet murmur of approval rolled through the seats. O'Leary nodded, then turned to the woman beside her. Ms. Davenport, you have something to show us. Claire rose. Gone was the corporate poise. In its place stood a woman stripped of polish, but full of conviction. She carried a brown folder, thick, dog-eared, and heavy with consequence. I gathered these over the past week, she said, laying them out on the table. Purchase orders, invoices, and serial number lists. Here's what the building paid for. And here, she tapped the next stack, is what was actually installed. The CBC reporter leaned forward, camera light blinking red. Claire continued, her tone precise but burning underneath. The supplier listed here, Northern Systems Landed, doesn't exist beyond a P.O. box. Its account was registered by someone inside this building's management team. Funds were transferred. Equipment was never delivered. And maintenance logs were falsified to hide it. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few sharp shouts. At the back of the room, Colin Hargrove rose, abruptly. This is absurd. These are confidential documents. You have no legal... TSSA already verified the serial mismatches, interrupted one of the inspectors, flipping his report. Several parts fail CSA standards. We'll be filing a compliance breach and recommending fines. Colin's face drained of color. Victoria Lang tried to regain control, her voice taut. Please, everyone, let's not... But she was drowned out by the noise. Residents shouting questions, the CBC reporter raising her mic, and the inspectors calmly packing up evidence. O'Leary struck her cane against the floor, the sharp crack silencing the room. You've all seen it. For months, we whispered. Tonight, we speak. This building deserves better than fear and falsehood. Claire exhaled, her shoulders trembling slightly as she looked toward Andre. He met her gaze and gave the smallest nod, gratitude, pride, something wordless. The TSSA official approached the table. Given the scope of the violations, this case will be referred to the ministry. Further criminal review may follow. The words landed like thunder, followed by the hum of dozens of cell phones recording. As the meeting dissolved into overlapping voices, Andre slipped toward the hallway for air. The corridor lights buzzed above, and for the first time in months, they didn't flicker. He leaned against the wall, breathing slow, steady. The storm had broken, but for once, it wasn't falling on him. A soft vibration in his pocket broke the quiet. His phone lit up. Cass, Toronto office. He hesitated, then answered. This is Bennett. Mr. Bennett, came the calm voice of Agent Rana. I wanted to inform you personally. Your file is officially closed. The investigation found no risk factors in your home. Zoe is safe. You're clear. Andre closed his eyes, the tension finally leaving his body. Thank you, he whispered. Take care of yourself, Mr. Bennett, she said gently. You've earned some peace. He hung up, exhaling a laugh that was half disbelief, half relief. Through the glass wall of the community room, he saw Claire still surrounded by residents, answering questions, her face illuminated by the overhead lights. Mrs. O'Leary caught his eye across the room and gave him a small, knowing nod. For a long time, Andre just stood there, the noise fading into a distant hum. Outside, the night sky glowed faintly with city light. Inside, amid all the chaos and revelation, something shifted. Not in the building's pipes or policies, but in its people. Northline Towers, for the first time in years, felt like a community again. And as Andre looked toward the doorway, where Claire's laughter mixed with the chatter of neighbors, he realized that the light they had all been waiting for wasn't from the overhead bulbs. It was from one another. The air inside the conference hall carried the weight of something larger than routine. Rows of residents filled the seats, familiar faces that had once looked at each other with suspicion, now bound together by shared outrage and a cautious kind of hope. At the front, the banner read in bold black letters, Special AGM, Northline Condominium Corporation Agenda, Board Accountability, Election, and Reform. For the first time, the meeting didn't feel like a formality. It felt like reckoning. The murmurs quieted when Victoria Lang, pale and visibly nervous, tapped the microphone. "We'll begin with the motion presented by the resident committee," she said, voice trembling slightly. "A vote of no confidence regarding Mr. Colin Hargrove, property manager." Colin sat stiffly 2 seats away, jaw tight, eyes darting from one face to another. The man who once commanded the room now looked like a guest in it. Mrs. O'Leary stood again, leaning on her cane but speaking with fire. "We've seen the reports. We've read the findings. This man gambled with our safety and blamed those who tried to protect it. Tonight, we vote not out of anger, but to rebuild trust." Applause erupted, brief but fierce. The ballot sheets were passed around, pens clicking in quiet rhythm. Within minutes, the result was clear, an overwhelming majority in favor of termination. Colin rose abruptly. "This is absurd," he hissed. "You'll regret," but Victoria's voice, steadier now, cut through his protest. "The motion passes, effective immediately." Security, discreet but firm, escorted him out. The door shut softly behind him, a sound that felt like closure. Next came the election. Names were nominated, hands raised, and before long, Mrs. O'Leary, reluctant but resolute, was confirmed as interim chair. Her first act was simple: honesty. "No more shadows," she said into the mic. "From this day forward, every dollar spent will be traceable. Every safety inspection will be public record. Transparency isn't charity, it's survival." The crowd nodded, energized. A new document was projected onto the wall. A proposed policy drafted with input from TSSA and the city's housing department. 1. Transparent Maintenance Fund. All expenditures publicly posted in the resident portal, with quarterly reports verified by a third-party auditor. 2. Anonymous whistleblower channel. Residents and staff may report safety or discrimination concerns directly to the city ombudsman, protected by confidentiality. 3. Anti-bias training. Mandatory workshops for board members and management, focusing on workplace equity and racial sensitivity. 4. Annual Community Scholarship, a fund to support technical training for youth living in the building. A few heads turned toward Andre when the last item appeared. Victoria, her composure now returned, looked toward him. "Mr. Bennett, in recognition of your service, the board would like to offer you the position of head of operations for Northline Towers. It's well deserved." Applause filled the hall. Again, louder this time. Andre rose, slowly, straightening the sleeves of his simple work shirt. He looked out at the faces, neighbors, who had once doubted him, a woman who had risked her career for him, and a child who was waiting at home, dreaming of a safer world. "Thank you," he said finally, voice steady, humble. "But if we're truly starting over, then let's start right. I don't need a title. I need the tools to make this place safe." The room fell quiet. "I want a budget increase for preventative maintenance, real repairs, not patches. And that scholarship you just mentioned, let's make it official. Use part of my salary increase to start it. It'll fund apprenticeships in plumbing, electrical, and HVAC for the kids in this building. We can teach them what integrity looks like, not just in words, but in work." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mrs. O'Leary clapped first, slow and deliberate. One by one, others joined, until the room thundered with applause. Claire, seated near the front, watched him with quiet admiration. She knew he didn't see himself as a hero, but in that moment, under the fluorescent light and the weight of change, he became something rarer, a builder of trust. By the end of the night, the resolutions passed unanimously. The TSSA officials signed off on a compliance plan. CBC packed their cameras.
Residents lingered, talking in softer tones, less gossip, more purpose. As the hall emptied, Andre lingered by the window overlooking the lake. The reflection of city lights shimmered across the glass, faint but steady, like the pulse of something alive again. Claire walked up beside him, a small smile playing at her lips. "You realize," she said, "you just turned a maintenance meeting into a civic movement." He chuckled quietly. "Guess buildings and people aren't that different. They both fall apart when no one cares enough to maintain them." She looked at him, eyes warm. "Then here's to maintenance and second chances." He met her gaze, the fatigue in his eyes tempered by something softer. "Here's to building something that lasts." Outside, the night stretched wide over Toronto, the city humming like an engine renewed, and for the first time in a long while, Andre felt not just the weight of responsibility, but the lightness of belonging, proof that even in the tallest towers, truth, once given room to breathe, could hold the whole structure upright. The late afternoon light stretched across Lake Ontario, spilling gold across the rippling surface. The city's skyline glowed in the distance, cranes, condos, and glass towers catching fire under the setting sun. But here, at the waterfront trail, the world moved slower. Zoe's laughter carried over the wind as she pedaled ahead on her small blue bike, tassels fluttering from the handlebars. "Look, Daddy! No hands!" she shouted, wobbling dangerously before gripping again. Andre jogged beside
her, mock stern. "Hands, Zoe, always hands." Claire walked on the other side, her coat unbuttoned, hair swept by the breeze. The three of them moved like a rhythm they hadn't planned but had somehow found. Steady, natural, unforced. It had been months since the boardroom confrontations, the investigations, the chaos. Northline Towers had quieted, almost healed, and so had Andre, in ways he hadn't realized until now. They reached a bench overlooking the lake. Zoe hopped off her bike and began skipping stones across the water. Each one leapt once, twice, then vanished beneath the surface, sending out ripples that shimmered like glass. Claire sat down, clasping her hands. Andre stood for a moment, watching the horizon before joining her. "She's happy," Claire said softly. "She's resilient," Andre replied. "Kids bounce back faster than we deserve." Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe adults can too, if we let ourselves." For a while they just sat in silence, the gentle hush of the lake wrapping around them. Somewhere far off, a fairy horn echoed. Then Claire turned to him. There was a hint of nervousness behind her calm. "Andre, can I ask you something personal?" He raised an eyebrow. "You just did." She laughed, shaking her head. "I mean it. I've been thinking a lot about us, about this." She gestured toward the bike, the lake, the fading light. "I don't want to just orbit your life. I want to be part of it, really part of it. If Zoe would have me." Andre's breath caught. He looked toward his daughter, hair shining in the sunset, her little figure framed against the endless water. "She already talks about you like you've been here forever," he said finally. "She calls you Miss Claire, who fixes hearts." Claire's eyes glistened. "That might be the kindest thing anyone's ever said about me." Andre smiled, quiet and genuine. "She's got good judgment." Claire hesitated, then reached over, her fingers brushing his. "And what about you, Andre Bennett? Do you think there's room for one more at your table?" He turned to face her fully. The sun had dropped low, painting her face in gold and shadow. "There's been an empty chair for a long time," he said. "Maybe it was waiting for you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zoe came running back, holding up a flat pebble like a trophy. "Look, I made it skip 4 times." Andre crouched, eyes wide in mock amazement. 4? That's a new record." "Claire taught me how," Zoe said proudly. "She says you gotta wait for the right stone, not just anyone." Andre looked up at Claire. "Sounds like good advice." The three of them laughed, and for the first time, it didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like living. A week later, the lobby of Northline Towers looked brighter than ever. The bulletin board that once displayed complaints and fines now bore a laminated poster bordered with blue tape. Safety and Dignity Index, this month, 94, 100. Below it, photos showed smiling residents during a recent maintenance workshop. Another pinned notice read, Boiler inspection complete, certified to TSSA standard. Andre passed by, toolbox in hand. He pressed his palm briefly against the wall, cooled at the touch. The same wall that had once radiated dangerous heat now held steady, balanced, alive. He caught his reflection in the glass door. Not a man defeated, not a hero, just someone who'd kept showing up until things were right. Mrs. O'Leary waved from the mailroom. See, Bennett? Told you truth has a spine. He grinned. Yeah, he said, and sometimes it even stands tall enough to fix a building. That evening, as twilight fell, the view from their apartment stretched across the lake. Zoe colored quietly at the kitchen table, while Claire stirred soup on the stove, humming under her breath. Andre leaned on the balcony rail, the wind cool against his face, the hum of the city softened by distance. When his voice came, steady, reflective, it was as though the lake itself carried it. Voiceover. Justice can be slow, but dignity can't afford to wait. We stand here, not because life is fair, but because we refuse to bend. He looked back into the apartment, at Zoe, at Claire, at the warmth spilling from the kitchen light, and smiled. Here, we choose to stand tall. The camera of life panned out, the lake calm, the skyline bright, the hum of a city moving forward. And in that stillness, the story of a man, a child, and a woman finding each other in the aftermath of injustice became what it was always meant to be. Not a fight for survival, but a quiet triumph of belonging